In this video, I'll show you how I edited this picture. The original was provided by the talented photographer Christy Harvey. She was kind enough to share it with a community of photographers, asking us to edit it in our own style. Some of the people liked these results and asked me to share the process. You should definitely go and check out Christy's portfolio in the link of the description below. To start off, let's admire how beautiful the photo is straight out of camera. The model, the dress, and the scenery match really nice. The color combination of the blues and the dress seems quite moody and works great together. For the style I wanted to create, there are a couple of factors that we can push a little bit further. Let's start with the contrasting value. If we apply a black and white filter, we can definitely see that even though the model and the background has a nice separation, there's still room for improvement and we can push it even more. The way I achieved this was by brightening the sky and darkening the foreground. In the original picture, we can see that the rocks on the right seem kind of unified and glued together. We can change that by adding different layers of values on top of each other to create some more depth. Let me show you what I mean by contrast in color. I'm gonna take some samples from the sky, from the ocean, from the rocks, and from the dress. If you can see, all of these colors are very close together in the color wheel, meaning that this is an analogous color scheme. We can push it further by turning this into a complementary color scheme instead. And the way we're gonna do that is we're going to choose something from the opposite side. In this case, I'm gonna choose something that is sitting between orange and yellow. I'm not being exact at the moment, I'm just gonna choose something that I know is going to be opposite. And once I do that, we can start seeing that it complements a little bit better and it's a little bit more dynamic. Now that we got the theory out of the way, the first thing we need to do is change the sky in the background, because that will give us enough motivation and a justification to start changing the colors of the image. We're going to select and isolate the subject, and also we're going to create a mask to remove the sky. After that is done, we're going to go to unsplash.com or whatever site you prefer and are going to start looking for sunrise or sunsets or whatever skies that you can feel inspired from. To save us a little bit of time, I already placed them in Photoshop. So the first one we had here is a very dramatic sky full of colors. I personally think it's a little bit busy. Maybe that will take too much protagonism from the model itself. The second one is kind of the opposite. It is too plain and simple. And this one I like. Actually, I would like to work on this later. I love the colors. I love where the light is coming from. I think this is a good candidate too. We have this other one. This is kind of the opposite. It is even darker and moodier than the original one. But the one I decided to go with is this one. The main thing that I like about this image is that it already is very bright behind the model and it contains blue on the corners, so it kind of suits both purposes. Now that we chose our sky, it's time to match the background and the foreground a little bit better, and we're going to go to the camera raw filter. We're going to make a very few changes. The first one, of course, we're going to increase the temperature. We're going to reduce the contrast quite a bit, not too much. We don't want to make it like this wash out, but I do want to have enough control to manipulate and kind of shape the light. I'm going to reduce the highlights a little bit more to recover some of the details and open up the shadow. Other than that, I think this works well and we're gonna leave it like this. As you can see from the before and after, it already starts to match a little bit better. Of course, we will also need to start blending the background and the foreground. I'm gonna choose a very soft brush and I'm gonna choose an opacity of around 15 to 20% to start matching it a little bit better. I want the light from the background to start spilling in the foreground, so I'm gonna choose black to start hiding a little bit of the mask from the original model, and this will give us this blending that we need to match both photos. With all this light coming from the back, this is going to spill some lights and some yellows. Of course, this will only apply to the highlights and to the parts that are directly touching the light. The way we're going to achieve this is by creating a solid adjustment layer, and since we already chose the yellow, we're going to work with this one and we're going to change it to soft light. Of course, we don't want it to be applied so uniformly in all the image. we just want it to be visible in the highlights. So we're going to double click until we get the blend if menu, and then we're going to drag this handle here until it disappears from the shadows, but not too much that it starts to disappear from the highlights too. So around this area is already good enough. You can see that it is no longer in the shadows, but there's still some light on the highlights. And press Alt, and then we'll drag it a little bit more to fine tune the results. Yeah, I like it the way it is now. As you can see, it kind of simulates that the light is coming from here. It doesn't touch the shadow part and keeps on going. We're going to use this mask. Let's invert the mask with Ctrl I, and let's start painting only in the upper part of the rock. With white, let's choose an opacity higher, maybe 80%, and we start painting on top of this. With white, just to reveal again the yellow part. And we're gonna come like here. Careful not to spill it to parts that shouldn't be touched by light. It doesn't need to be perfect, but it should cover all the visible parts that our eyes will immediately assume they are gonna be touched by light. Let's see the before and after. Now this is looking like it is affected by the sun. As you can see, even now with the highlights, it doesn't look very realistic. And the way we're going to fix this now, we're going to take another adjustment layer. Let's take a solid color, and I'm gonna keep the same hue, same saturation, and so on. But this time I'm gonna put it in soft light and reduce the opacity to around 20 to 15%. Again, we just want it to be visible on the rock, so I'm going to invert the mask, and again with a brush set on white, I'm gonna paint on top of this. So the one that has the blend if option accounts for the lights that are touching directly by the sun, and the one that we just put without the blend if is kind of a more general light in the scene. But in combination, this makes it look a little bit more realistic. Yeah, this is a start to shaping up a little bit more. The next step that we wanna have now, we're going to create some more separation in the rocks. The way we're going to do this is quite simple. We're gonna take the lasso tool and we're going to create a selection that is gonna be rough. It doesn't have to be precise, but it needs to follow the shape of the rocks, so this doesn't need to be super precise. And after this is done, we're gonna create another layer with a brush very big and an opacity of around 20%. We're gonna start painting some lights coming behind those rocks, like so. If you wonder why would you have lights in the back of those rocks, we are kind of assuming that there's some haze in here, maybe the sunrise will have some humidity. Anyway, this is more an artistic approach. We're not taking a scientific approach, but if this is working visually, we're gonna take it. And I'm gonna apply the same principle here in this area here with the lasso tool. I'm gonna create a contour of these rocks. Big brush, 20%, and just we're gonna create some haze here. I think we have some space to do it in the rocks in the middle. And then we're coming here, let's go up. This time, let's make the brush a little bit smaller and start painting again here. If you take the before and after just of this layer, you will see a huge difference. Even though it's not too realistic, it will still give you the impression that it's a sunny day, it is a sunrise, and we already have the excuse and the justification from the sky to add these yellows on the scene. If you can see that here we have some halos, we can fix this just by applying a Gaussian blur in this layer. Go to filters, blur and Gaussian blur. So let's apply a Gaussian blur of around 5%. We can also get to the smudge tool, get a bigger brush and start pulling that. Yeah, so now it doesn't look as harsh as before. Same here. Yeah, we're just smudging this area here. And I think this already looks a lot better. Let's see the before and after. Let's move to the rocks that we have at the back. And so the rule of thumb that we have now is after we create this rough selection, we're going to change a bit the colors that we're using. Every time that we have objects to the back, the colors are going to be less saturated, so let's pull it to the left. And with the same big brush, we're going to just softly brush on top of everything. And for the lower part, let's reduce the size of our brush and just brush again, trying to increase the contrast even more. Once again, we have the problems with the hard edges, so with the smudge tool and a strength of around 7 to 8%, let's push the colors down to delete the seams and reduce the hard edges. Okay, so now that we have the haze done, we can already see the difference in the image. We added the value contrast by creating different levels, and we also added the contrast in colors. So now it will be a good moment just to add our splashes. The way I'm going to do that is just by taking one of the stock images from unsplash.com, and I'm going to create our own custom brush. The reason I'm not putting it here and just start playing with the blending mode is because I believe we will have more flexibility if we have our own brush and start playing around with it. This is the image that we have. I'm gonna create our custom brush simply by applying a mask here on top of this area where we have more contrast and some of the splashes are more visible. And I'm gonna go to select, and in the color range I'm gonna go with the highlights. The idea for me is to keep only the white area. Let's play with the range. If we move it to the right, we're gonna limit it maybe too much, and let's play with the fuzziness to see which one can eliminate as much as the other colors as possible. So for me this is a good balance in here. I'm gonna keep this one. I'm gonna fill this with black. I'm gonna create another layer, place it below this one, and I'm gonna fill that with white. So in the black layer I'm gonna choose our eraser, and I'm gonna just get rid of all this excess, trying to keep it as clean as possible. Yeah, I think this is going to work really well. It doesn't need to be super precise, but enough to give us a good stamp in the brush. Again, I'm gonna select this with the square marquee, and I'm going to go to edit, define brush preset. Just put whatever name we want, splash. So with this we have our own custom splashes, and we can change the color, we can play around with this. Yeah, so going back to our image in here, we are going to go below the layer with the haze. I'm going to create another layer. I'm gonna choose something that is close to white, a little bit bluish, not too much. As you can see, it's very desaturated, but we can start playing with that. Change it, maybe we can rotate it a little bit. This is one of the advantages of using, yeah. And then we go ahead and we delete all this excess again. We can also apply some Gaussian blur here, just so it doesn't look that sharp, maybe around 4%. If the color doesn't fit well, we can just apply an adjustment layer, or we can press Ctrl U and start modifying the adjustments directly from here. We can reduce the saturation, or we can change the hue even, maybe to something more yellowish, or reduce the brightness. Again, we don't want this to take too much attention from the model. This is just a little accent that we just gonna put in there. The same thing I'm gonna do here. I'm going to create just the lasso tool once more in this area. Doesn't need to be perfect. And again, with the brush that we just made, I'm going to adjust this, reduce the size, maybe rotate it a little bit more, and create a couple of splashes. Maybe brighter. Yep, this works well. If you can see a little bit of repetition here, let's work with this one. I don't like it this much. Let's create our mask again. Again, let's go with the smash tool and just delete just some of this. Yeah. Yep. All right. So with that, we already finished the haze, the splashes, and some of the yellows. Something more that we can do to make it look even better is apply some light leaks from the left side. You can find any amount of light leaks and overlays on the internet. I just did it one myself. I just put some oranges, and the closer you are to the center of the image, you can start getting more to the whites. This is going to be in the links in the description. You can use it. Just take this, drop it in the image, put it on top of everything, and I'm going to change the blending mode to a screen. Of course, this is too much. Let's reduce the opacity of this one. Let's change also the size, put it around here. As you can see, this is too yellowish. I want to change the hue to something more orangey. I'm gonna press Ctrl U to bring the hue and saturation, and then I'm going to move it slightly to the left to turn it into something more orange, not too much. If you can see, if I take it to the right, this will look green. If I take it too much to the left, it's gonna be red. So just a little bit, maybe -5 or -4, something around this should do the trick. Yeah, and this makes it look more dramatic. Again, this by itself wouldn't work if we hadn't put all the other adjustments. This like this looks fake, but once we put the haze and the other adjustments on the rocks, this starts to look more believable. I'm gonna take the same layer, I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to reduce the size. This time I'm not gonna put a screen blending mode. I need to choose something that resembles the sun a little bit more, and for that I'm going to go with linear dodge add. This looks crazy, but if I reduce it a little bit more and put it kind of in the center, instead of playing with opacity, I'm gonna play with the fill, and I'm gonna reduce it to a point that it doesn't look too bad. I can also stretch it a little bit. Yeah, something like this. Yeah, this looks better. Again, fill. If you play with the opacity, this is going to reduce it something like this. But if you play with the fill, this is going to adjust more to the lighting from the layers below, and it looks much more realistic. Yeah, I think 10%, 20% should look good enough. It is time to start working on our model. As you can see, I haven't touched her at all, so I'm gonna select her again. The first thing, I'm going to add some curves adjustment layer, and I'm gonna increase the brightness so it reflects a little bit more that the light is coming from the left side. I'm gonna increase the opacity of my brush so it is more evident where the light is coming from. Yeah, so the light is coming from here. It's hit her leg, maybe it hits a little bit of this side from here, and the arm from here should be hitting too. It shouldn't go behind the waist, something like this. Maybe just like this is gonna look better. And the reason I'm being super sloppy with the mask is because I'm going to apply a blend dip option here. So I'm going to do double click on the layer, and I'm going to drag it from the shadows just again to the right, so it is only visible on the highlights. And once I have something like this, I'm gonna press Alt and drag it even more to make it look more natural. As you can see, her face and the arm is very evident what we're doing, something around that. This will give her more pop. I'm going to reduce the opacity of the layer in general, and this is the before and after. As you can see, it already gives her more pop. Maybe on her cheeks it's not very flattering. Let's erase a little bit more with the black brush. Let's take it from the cheeks, and I believe this is looking good. I need to apply some of the shadows that we have on the rocks the same color here, so I'm gonna create one solid adjustment layer, but this time I'm gonna choose some very dark brown. I'm gonna go with soft light, and I'm gonna apply it only on her dress. Let's invert the mask, and with something like this. Finally, to finish up this image, we need to add some general adjustments layers on top of everything to make it more cohesive. The first one we're going to do, we're going to add some color lookup, and we're going to go for something like the fall colors here. Yes, see, this is looking nice. Let's reduce the opacity. We don't like it this bright. And since this is a lighting scenario where the light is coming from the back, if it is a backlight picture, the front here should be much darker. So I'm going to create one curves layer, and I'm gonna reduce it quite a bit. Let's select luminosity, blend mode even more. Let's reduce the highlights too. Yeah, and we're going to apply the mask only on the foreground. Yeah, something like that. After this, we're going to create one layer. We're gonna press Ctrl Alt Shift E, and this is going to merge and create another layer, and we're going to apply a soft light. This is gonna make it super contrasty, but we can reduce the opacity to something around 15 to 20%, and this will make it more cohesive. But I want to have another one. I'm going to create one blank layer, and I'm going to choose the blues from the top, and I'm going to paint it with soft light too, or overlay even. Let's press again Ctrl Shift E, and we're going to take this image to camera raw. In here I'm going to made the last adjustments. Essentially I want to increase the exposure a little bit. I think it was too dark with all the adjustments we did, something around that. Decrease the highlights again, open up the shadows a little bit more. This time I want to add some clarity, but we are not going to overdo it. We're gonna do it something around 5 to 9 points, and the texture the same, something around 5 points. And that's it. I hope you learned something new and get some value out of this video. If you wanna learn how to create your first scene in 3D, make sure to click on the video on the screen now.